You're standing inside a city that still pretends everything is normal. The lights are on, the shelves are full, and the crowds move with that familiar complacency. The kind that only exists when people believe tomorrow will look exactly like today. But you know better. You've seen the pattern repeat itself across every collapsing zone. The warning signs don't come from alarms or government broadcasts. They come from the silence before the rush, from the moment the public senses that something is off but hasn't yet admitted it out loud. That is the breakdown threshold, the thin line between order by illusion and chaos by inevitability. When panic buying begins, it never starts with screaming or shattered glass. It starts with one empty shelf, one news headline, one subtle disruption in the supply chain. The city absorbs it quietly at first, but the human mind is wired for fear, and fear spreads faster than any virus. You must understand this. Once the masses realize scarcity is real, every second becomes a contest for resources, and the unprepared will weaponize desperation. Your objective is to stay ahead of that psychological collapse, not by reacting to the chaos, but by anticipating its first tremor. The people around you won't recognize the shift when it happens. They trust systems that were never designed to withstand true pressure. They assume trucks will keep arriving, water will keep flowing, and pharmacies will magically restock. They assume stability because they've never lived without it. That ignorance is your advantage. You operate outside the illusion. You track the indicators. You prepare before the crowds awaken. When you secure what you need in the final 48 hours of normalcy, you remove yourself from the battlefield long before it forms. This is the rule you follow without exception. You do not wait for the panic. You move before the spark. Because once the spark catches, the city transforms into a feeding ground of scarcity, and anyone caught in the rush becomes part of the problem, visible, vulnerable, and expendable. Preparation is not about stacking supplies. It is about denying the enemy, fear, chaos, and the desperate masses the opportunity to touch you. You take control now, while control is still possible. Water is always the first resource to vanish, not because the city runs out of it, but because the population realizes, too late, that they can't survive 3 days without it. Panic buying always begins with liquids: bottled water, filters, purification tablets. The masses won't understand the math, but they will feel the fear. And fear is enough to strip an entire supermarket aisle in under 10 minutes. Your mission is to secure a minimum 14-day supply long before the first civilian reaches for that last bottle on the shelf. You start by recognizing how fragile your city's water grid truly is. Every pipeline, every purification station, every delivery truck operates on the assumption that society remains calm. The moment tension rises, demand surges, and the system fractures. You don't depend on municipal stability. You bypass it. You build redundancy. You acquire water before sunrise, when the world is half asleep and no one is observing what you take or where you go. You buy in multiple locations, never forming patterns, never showing volume in a single stop. OPSEC is not optional. It prevents unwanted attention long after panic spreads. You store water with the discipline of someone who understands its strategic value. Keep it concealed in containers that reveal nothing. Hide it behind furniture, under storage platforms, inside sealed trunks. Your objective is to ensure that if a neighbor or intruder scans your home, they see nothing more than an ordinary residence. Scarcity will make people search for opportunities. You eliminate every signal that you possess more than they do. But purchasing water is only phase 1. The real advantage comes from purification. While the rest of the population fights over bottled supplies, you secure tools that grant long-term independence. Gravity filters, chemical purifiers, emergency distillation setups. These are the assets that continue working when store shelves remain empty for weeks. You don't wait for shortages to force improvisation. You prepare the system before the crisis demands it. Understand this. When the panic finally begins, bottled water becomes currency. People will trade food, medicine, and safety for a few liters. But you will not trade. You will not bargain. You will not expose your reserves. You operate from a position of strength, silent, unseen, self-contained. Water transforms from a basic need into strategic leverage, and you ensure your supply is secured long before the city realizes what it's losing. The masses will rush. You will not. They will react. You will execute. This is how you stay ahead of the collapse. By locking down the first resource the world always forgets until the moment it's gone. Medical supplies disappear faster than food when panic ignites, because fear of injury, infection, and illness exposes a truth most people never confront. Without treatment, even minor wounds become life-threatening. The city relies on pharmacies stocked through rigid schedules. Any disruption, real or rumored, creates a chain reaction. One empty shelf becomes three. Three become an entire aisle. By the time the news reports shortages, the masses have already swept through every store within a 10-kilometer radius. That is the domino effect, and once it starts falling, nothing stops it. Your task is to secure what you need before that first domino tips. You begin by identifying the essentials, not the luxuries. You don't waste time on items that comfort civilians. You focus on tools that keep you operational. Antibiotics, antiseptics, pain control, trauma dressings, gloves, bandages, splints. Anything that stops bleeding, fights infection, or stabilizes an injury long enough for you to move. These items vanish instantly once panic spreads. You acquire them quietly, divided across several days, rotating stores, keeping purchases small enough to avoid patterns. In a collapsing environment, being remembered is a liability. Storage is not about convenience. It is about invisibility. Medical supplies attract attention, even from those who don't know what they're looking at. You secure them in containers that disguise their value. Unmarked boxes, tool cases, household storage that reveals nothing if opened. You do not display gear. You do not discuss it. You do not allow anyone to know what you possess. The moment people realize medicine is scarce, they will search, plead, manipulate, or steal. You remove their opportunity before they ever recognize the need. Understand the psychological shift that occurs when the city begins to break. During the first wave of panic buying, civilians target water and food. During the second wave, they target medicine. During the third, they target each other. If you wait until the first injury occurs, you are already too late. Every crisis zone shows the same pattern. Hospitals overwhelmed, clinics locked down, emergency lines jammed, and pharmacists forced to ration under pressure. You cannot rely on these systems. You must replace them with your own. You prepare for scenarios the average person refuses to imagine. Infections from dirty water, injuries from broken glass, burns from improvised cooking setups, sprains from rushed evacuations, lacerations from panic-fueled crowds. You stock what treats these problems now, because treating them later will be impossible. Every item stored today prevents a crisis tomorrow. While the masses scramble in fear, you remain untouched by their desperation. Your supplies are secured, hidden, and ready. You operate from a position of medical autonomy, silent, capable, unexposed. This is how you stay alive when the city loses its ability to heal itself. Fuel is not a commodity during a crisis. It is mobility, leverage, and escape compressed into liquid form. When panic buying erupts, fuel becomes the single point of failure that can trap an entire population in place. Roads clog with vehicles running on hope instead of gasoline. Stations run dry before noon. Tempers ignite faster than engines. You do not allow yourself to be part of that gridlocked mass. You secure your fuel before the herd senses the coming choke point. The first rule is simple. You acquire fuel before the headlines shift, before the rumor spreads, before a single station posts a limit. When civilians notice a mild price increase or a delivery delay, they will swarm pumps without logic or discipline. You stay ahead by watching indicators they ignore. Weather anomalies, geopolitical ripples, freight disruptions, refinery shutdowns. These signals tell you when mobility is about to become currency. You act before awareness becomes panic. You never fill multiple containers at one station. That draws eyes, questions, memory. You rotate locations, times, and quantities. Early morning, one can. Afternoon, a top-off. Evening, another small reserve. You blend into civilian patterns so no single point reveals your total supply. Every action must serve OPSEC, because fuel attracts the desperate, and the desperate observe more than you think. Transporting fuel is a liability if done carelessly. You secure containers built for pressure and movement, containers that don't leak, rattle, or advertise their contents. You load them out of sight, cover them, and keep your vehicle interior invisible to anyone walking past. Your steps from pump to trunk are controlled, minimal, and unremarkable. You move like someone with nothing to hide, even when hiding everything. At home, storage becomes a second battlefield. Fuel must be placed where heat will not compromise it, and where neighbors won't notice unusual activity. You do not stack cans in garages with windows. You do not broadcast the metallic scent of gasoline to anyone passing by. You use sealed storage, dark corners, locked compartments. The goal is simple. No one should suspect you have enough fuel to move when they cannot. Understand the strategic weight of fuel during collapse. Food keeps you alive. Water sustains you. But fuel gives you choice. Choice of route, choice of timing, choice of whether to stay or disappear. When riots block intersections, when looters spread through districts, when law enforcement loses control, those with empty tanks become prisoners of their own streets. You will not be one of them. Mobility is a weapon, and you safeguard it long before the city realizes it is losing the ability to move. Panic will trap them. Preparation will free you. This is how you remain untouchable when the grid collapses beneath the weight of fear. Food is never the first item civilians panic over, but it is always the one that breaks them. When the shelves begin to thin, when cans vanish row by row, when the bakery section turns into an empty grid of metal trays, the city reaches a psychological breaking point. Hunger is not a fear. It is a countdown. And once people hear the ticking, they will take anything from anyone by any means. Your objective is to secure a 30-day supply before that countdown enters their minds. You begin with the understanding that long shelf-life food is more than calories. It is stability, silence, and operational independence. You do not grab snacks, comfort foods, or anything that demands refrigeration. You acquire dense, durable, conceal-ready provisions that deliver maximum energy with minimum visibility. Rice, oats, lentils, beans, pasta, canned meats, high-fat spreads, dehydrated meals. Civilians overlook these items until nothing else is left. You take them now, quietly, in quantities small enough per trip to avoid suspicion. Never load your cart like a prepper. Load it like someone shopping for a week. Your disguise is normalcy. The panic always follows the same cycle. First, bread disappears, then instant noodles, then canned soups, then proteins. The average person buys based on impulse, not longevity. They fill their baskets until they realize too late that their food will expire long before the crisis ends. You, on the other hand, build a system. You store calories that outlast uncertainty. You calculate intake. You prioritize efficiency over flavor, utility over comfort. Food is not entertainment. Food is endurance. Storage is where most civilians fail because they treat food like decor. Visible, accessible, advertised to anyone who walks into their home. You do the opposite. You practice silent storage. You place provisions in concealed compartments, behind false fronts, inside containers that look like anything except food reserves. You layer your stocks in locations that do not draw a single glance. Under beds, behind clothing, inside opaque bins. No labels, no transparent tubs. You eliminate every visual cue that signals abundance. In crisis zones, being perceived as well-supplied is an invitation to conflict. Understand the behavioral shift that scarcity triggers. As food runs low, trust evaporates. Neighbors who once shared casual greetings begin scanning each other's hands, bags, and expressions. Families begin rationing. Supermarkets enforce limits. Security guards appear at entrances. And eventually, desperate individuals start following anyone who looks like they found something extra. You avoid becoming a target by moving before the tension spikes and by maintaining the illusion that you have nothing worth taking. You also secure tools that extend your food beyond its shelf life. Oxygen absorbers, sealed containers, mylar bags, compact storage systems. These tools allow you to quietly scale your reserves without altering the footprint of your living space. Civilians will store chaos. You will store discipline. When the panic wave finally hits the city, people will fight over crumbs. They will push, shout, and abandon rational thought. But you will observe from a distance untouched, because your preparations were complete long before hunger entered the public consciousness. Scarcity will crush them. It will not touch you. You will eat in silence while the world around you starves in noise. When a city begins to fracture, communication becomes the first sense to fail. Not sight, not sound, information. The networks civilians rely on are built for convenience, not survival. When towers overload, when power grids flicker, when emergency lines jam, the average person becomes blind to everything except what's directly in front of them. You will not operate blind. You will secure your own channels long before the public realizes theirs are collapsing. You start by accepting a simple truth. Any communication system dependent on the city's infrastructure is a liability. Phones, Wi-Fi, messaging apps, these are the tools of civilians who assume stability. You do not assume. You prepare. You secure devices that bypass the grid entirely. Handheld radios, receivers, shortwave systems. Tools that allow you to listen when the world goes silent and to speak when no one else can reach beyond their own street. These devices are the difference between reacting late and moving first. But acquiring gear is only the first layer. Your greatest advantage lies in how you conceal it. Communications equipment draws attention because it signals capability, and capability attracts those who lack it. You store your radios in cases that look harmless. You hide antennas in everyday objects, not on display like a beacon of preparedness. You maintain your equipment with the discipline of someone who knows that one dropped signal can cost more than a conversation. It can cost your position. You learn the frequencies before the collapse, not during it. You test your devices in silence, away from windows, away from observers, away from the curious eyes of neighbors whose fear will eventually turn them into liabilities. You know how to scan for emergency broadcasts, how to read shifting patterns in local chatter, how to detect when law enforcement channels go quiet. Silence on a frequency is not absence. It is a warning. You interpret these warnings while others wander blindly. Do not underestimate the psychological power of information. In a collapsing city, the person who knows what is happening moves while the rest remain frozen. The masses will rely on rumors, on social media panic, on fragmented reports from strangers who cannot verify anything. You, on the other hand, will listen to clean signals. You will verify. You will adapt based on facts instead of fear. Understand this. Communication is not just about reaching out. It is about staying unseen. You never broadcast unless necessary. You never transmit from the same location twice. You keep your voice low, your messages brief, your presence minimal. Transmission reveals position. You maintain the discipline to observe without exposing yourself. The civilians will scream into dead phones, hoping someone hears them. You will operate in controlled silence. When the city's noise devolves into chaos, when systems overload, when confusion spreads like fire, you will possess the one advantage that governs all others: clarity. While they panic, you will know. While they react, you will anticipate. Information is the battlefield. You claim it early and hold it long after the rest have lost their connection to the world. This is how you stay oriented when the grid fails. This is how you maintain control when communication collapses. This is how you remain the only one who can see the full battlefield while everyone else stumbles through the dark. In a collapsing city, food and water may keep you alive, but documents and cash determine where you're allowed to go, who will let you pass, and what doors remain open when the system fractures. Identity becomes leverage. Cash becomes mobility. And losing either one, through theft, panic, or poor OPSEC, can trap you in a city that's turning hostile by the hour. Your objective is simple: secure these assets before the crowd even realizes their value. You start with documents, the true passports of survival. Identification, medical records, property papers, insurance details, travel documents, anything that proves who you are when digital systems fail. Civilians trust their data to the cloud, never imagining the day when servers go dark or networks choke under overload. You don't trust anything that requires electricity. You maintain physical copies, sealed, waterproofed, concealed in layers that survive fire, water, and forced entry. A document lost during collapse is a path closed. A document preserved is a route forward. Your storage method must be invisible, not in drawers, not in desks, not in the obvious places intruders search first. You place them inside disguised containers, behind false panels, inside walls, beneath flooring, any location that blends into the architecture of your home. Your goal is not to hide them from amateurs. It is to hide them from anyone with time and motivation. A thief may search for valuables, but documents rarely seem worth the risk. You exploit that psychology. You make the most important items the least noticeable. Cash becomes your second pillar. When digital transactions fail, Whether from grid loss, network outages, or panic-induced overload, cash becomes king. In the opening stages of a breakdown, cash is a diplomatic weapon that buys silence, speed, and opportunity. But flashing money in a desperate city is suicidal. You keep small denominations divided into multiple caches, each concealed in a separate location. Nothing thick enough to bulge, nothing obvious enough to spark curiosity. If one stash is compromised, the others remain operational. Your movement patterns must reflect discretion. When gathering or organizing these assets, you do not allow anyone to observe your routine. Curtains closed, lights dim, sound minimized. Even the act of counting cash can draw attention if shadows shift or surfaces reflect. You perform every action with the mindset that eyes exist even where you cannot see them, because in collapse they do. Understand the strategic power of identity assets when systems fail. Borders tighten, curfews emerge, authorities become unpredictable, and civilians without proper documents become obstacles rather than individuals. You never want to be the person pleading for passage or explanation. You want to be the person whose papers end questions before they begin. Documentation doesn't just grant access, it eliminates friction, and in crisis, friction is fatal. You also prepare for mobility, a go bag with a minimal hardened packet of documents and cash, sealed, concealed, ready to deploy at a moment's notice. If the city shifts from unstable to uninhabitable, you don't scramble. You don't search drawers or open safes. You lift one bag and move. That speed is not convenience, it is survival. While the masses rely on failing digital identities and empty bank accounts, you will hold the two assets that retain power even as society fractures: proof of who you are and the means to move without hesitation. These items transform chaos into manageable terrain. They give you options when the city collapses into a maze of restrictions and desperation. This is how you stay ahead when access becomes weaponized. This is how you move through a failing system without allowing it to trap you. This is how you retain control of your future when the world around you loses control of everything else. A collapsing city doesn't announce its danger with fire or gunshots. It announces it with eyes. Eyes watching windows, watching doors, watching movements that hint at who still has something worth taking. In this stage, your greatest threat isn't the chaos itself, it's attention. Once people believe you're better supplied, better organized, or simply calmer than they are, you become a target. Your mission is to erase yourself from their calculations. You secure your perimeter not by building walls, but by shaping perception. You make your home appear uninteresting, uninviting, and unrewarding. You begin with light discipline. When neighborhoods go dark, any illuminated window becomes a beacon. Civilians will gravitate toward the glow, hoping it represents safety, supplies, or opportunity. You shut it down. You control every lumen that escapes your perimeter. Curtains thick enough to smother silhouettes. Lights low enough to mimic outage conditions. A home that looks powerless keeps the curious away. A home that shines draws the desperate. Sound is your second battlefield. Panic amplifies every noise because people are listening for advantage. Someone cooking, someone cleaning, someone moving with purpose. You eliminate audible signatures. No clattering pans, no dragging containers, no footsteps echoing through quiet hallways. You operate as if surrounded by predators who hunt by ear. Because in collapse, you are. Movement patterns must also change. Predictability is vulnerability. Stepping outside at the same times each day, using the same path, opening the same door, These habits map your life to anyone paying attention. You break the pattern. You vary your routes. You reduce your presence. You avoid lingering in open sightlines. You become a ghost, moving through your own territory, never allowing observers to gather enough data to predict your next action. Your exterior must reinforce the illusion of scarcity. A property that looks fortified sends a message. Something valuable is inside. That is the wrong message. You aim for subtle decay. Nothing broken, nothing exposed, just ordinary, unremarkable, unworthy of risk. Trash cans not overflowing, but not spotless. Windows intact, but uninviting. A visual profile that tells scavengers, don't bother. This is psychological warfare, and you win by convincing them you have nothing they want. Inside, your real defense is OPSEC, the discipline to keep your preparations invisible even under pressure. Supplies are stored deep, not near entry points. Noise-generating tasks are performed during ambient cover. Rainstorms, distant chaos, or hours when urban noise briefly rises. Every action is timed to blend into the environment. Nothing you do should raise a single question in the mind of someone passing by. Understand the mindset shift occurring outside your walls. As scarcity intensifies, ethics erode. Neighbors who once exchanged polite greetings begin analyzing each other's survival potential. People seek out the strong not to follow them, but to strip them. You must not appear strong. You must appear neutral, unnoticed, invisible in the sea of urban decay. The moment you look like someone who planned ahead is the moment you inherit enemies you never asked for. Your perimeter isn't just physical, it is psychological. You craft an aura of emptiness so effective that opportunists walk past without a second thought. You are present, alert, armed with awareness, but to them you are nothing. And in a collapsing city, nothing is the safest thing you can be. This is how you avoid confrontation long before it reaches your door. This is how you outmaneuver the hungry, the desperate, and the reckless without ever engaging them. This is how you maintain total control of your environment when the world outside loses control entirely.